In the aisles of grocery stores from Vancouver to Toronto, a subtle but seismic shift is underway. Shoppers pause, scanning for the tiny maple leaf labels that mark Canadian-made goods, deliberately sidestepping American brands. This isn't a loud protest with picket signs or viral hashtags. It's a quiet rebellion, a collective pivot in consumer behavior that's sending shockwaves through the US economy. In 2025, Canada, America's closest ally, has begun to unplug its wallet from McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Amazon, and Nike, redirecting billions in spending away from US products. What began as a trade dispute has spiraled into something far more profound, a collapse of trust that threatens not just corporate profits but the broader influence of American brands across North America and beyond. This is no mere boycott, it's a consumer-led redefinition of economic power, and it raises a chilling question. If Canada can turn away, who's next? The numbers tell a stark story. According to a 2025 Angus Reid poll, 59% of Canadians now actively avoid American brands, a choice reflected in their shopping carts, travel plans, and streaming subscriptions. This shift isn't symbolic, it's devastating. The U.S. Travel Association reports that a mere 10% drop in Canadian travelers could erase $2.1 billion and 14,000 jobs from the U.S. economy. Yet the reality is far worse. Cross-border car traffic has already plummeted 23%, and flight bookings for summer 2025 are down over 70% compared to the previous year. Hotels in border towns sit half-empty, restaurants see fewer patrons, and tourist attractions from Las Vegas to upstate New York report billions in lost revenue. This isn't just a dip, it's a collapse of a once reliable economic lifeline. At the heart of this upheaval lies a trade war that ignited in early 2025. On February 1st, President Donald Trump announced 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, escalating by April to include autos and consumer goods. The move was meant to flex American muscle, but it backfired spectacularly. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government responded with surgical precision, imposing counter-tariffs and export bans on select U.S. products. Provincial regulators like the Liquor Control Board of Ontario pulled American spirits from shelves, leading to a staggering 66.3% plunge in U.S. liquor sales between March 5th and April 30th. Overall, liquor sales in Canada dropped 12.8% as consumers swapped Jack Daniels for homegrown alternatives. The message was clear. Canada wasn't just retaliating with policy, it was mobilizing its people. This consumer revolt is reshaping the North American economic landscape. Canadians aren't burning flags or chanting slogans, they're making deliberate choices at the checkout line. A staggering 85% of Canadians, per Angus Reid, have either replaced or plan to replace American goods with local alternatives. McDonald's Canada reported one of its worst quarters since 2020, with global comparable sales sliding 3.6%, largely due to tariff uncertainty and eroding consumer confidence. Franchises have slashed orders for Idaho potatoes, leaving U.S. suppliers in the Midwest scrambling. A Missouri packaging plant has canceled shifts, and store managers across Canada report unchanged foot traffic but sharp declines in purchases of American brands. Social media amplifies the movement, with apps like Buy Canadian guiding shoppers to local products, turning every receipt into a statement of defiance. The ripple effects are profound. Supply chains, once seamless across the border, are fracturing. In March, Reuters reported that Canadian provinces delisted United States spirits, wiping out billions in export volume overnight. Brown-Forman's CEO described it as worse than a tariff, and he wasn't exaggerating. When products vanish from shelves, the impact isn't just financial, it's existential. Canadian retailers have paused restocking United States oranges and sodas, and even Oreo faced backlash when consumers noticed packages labeled "Made in Mexico," sparking outrage over shifting production. The betrayal felt personal, as if American brands had abandoned their North American roots. Meanwhile, Heinz ketchup, once a staple on Canadian tables, is being replaced by French's, a shift tied to the 2014 closure of a Heinz plant in Ontario. Retailers now stock homegrown alternatives, reflecting a broader skepticism of United States goods. Travel patterns tell a similar story. Canadians, once frequent visitors to United States cities, are now vacationing at home or jetting to Mexico and Europe. The United States Travel Association warns that the decline in Canadian tourists threatens thousands of jobs and billions in revenue. Cities like New York and Las Vegas report sharp drops in bookings, while regional hotspots in upstate New York feel the burn firsthand. Restaurants, hotels, and tour operators are missing Canadian customers, and the absence is palpable. When even routine road trips across the border vanish, the fallout spreads like wildfire, leaving local economies reeling. This isn't just a trend, it's a consumer revolt, triggered by trade policy, with implications that stretch far beyond tourism. The corporate toll is equally alarming. Amazon, a titan of global commerce, announced in January 2025 that it would shutter all 7 of its Quebec warehouses, cutting 1,700 full-time jobs and 250 seasonal positions. The decision followed union victories and mounting consumer backlash, with delivery delays doubling across the province. By mid-February, 41% of Canadians plan to reduce or abandon Amazon entirely, and 78% committed to buying Canadian goods overall. Tesla, another American icon, faced turbulence as 71% of Canadians supported a moratorium on its sales, with Quebec and Ontario seeing a surge in Cybertruck order cancellations. Streaming platforms like Netflix and Disney Plus are also bleeding subscribers, exacerbated by earlier account-sharing crackdowns and price hikes that fueled consumer resentment. Nike, too, has stumbled, with Canadian youth groups campaigning against its labor practices, pushing shoppers toward domestic apparel despite higher costs. What makes this rebellion so striking is its silence. Canadians aren't staging rallies or flooding social media with manifestos. They're simply choosing differently, opting for French's over Heinz, Hive over Netflix, Royale over Pampers. Every purchase is a vote, every cancelled subscription a protest. This grassroots movement, gaining traction in Quebec and Ontario, has turned the shopping cart into a political weapon. Retailers are adapting, sourcing more local products and sidelining American brands. Distribution centers are closing, and workers in Missouri, Quebec, and beyond are losing shifts. The supply chain meltdown is real, and it's not just about tariffs, it's about trust. This erosion of trust is perhaps the most alarming consequence. American brands, once untouchable, are losing shelf space, subscribers, and moral standing. McDonald's, Amazon, Tesla, Oreo, Heinz. These aren't just logos, they're the backbone of U.S. cultural and economic power. For decades, they've symbolized reliability, innovation, and aspiration. Now, in a matter of months, that perception is crumbling. A soda is no longer just a drink, it's a choice between loyalty and resistance. A pair of sneakers speaks to ethics, not just fashion. A canceled streaming subscription reflects values, not just budgets. When trust evaporates, the systems that made American brands dominant begin to falter. The implications extend far beyond Canada's borders. If America's closest neighbor can pivot so decisively, what does that signal to the rest of the world? The quiet boycott threatens not just corporate profits but the broader architecture of U.S. influence. Currency dominance, capital outflow, and global market standing are all at risk. If Canada can unplug from American brands, other nations may follow, reevaluating their reliance on U.S. products and platforms. This isn't just a reaction to one policy, it's a potential turning point. A moment where honestly consumer behavior, not tariffs, decides who leads and who follows. The political context adds another layer of complexity. Trump's tariffs were a calculated move, but they underestimated Canada's resolve. Carney's retaliatory measures, counter-tariffs, export bans, and product delistings, galvanized a consumer base already skeptical of American intentions. The trade war has exposed a deeper truth. Economic trust between neighbors is no longer guaranteed. When Canada, a nation bound to the U.S. by geography, history, and culture, chooses to walk away, it's a warning to American policymakers and corporations alike. Loyalty abroad can vanish without warning, and honestly, rebuilding it may be a Herculean task. The grassroots nature of this movement makes it even more potent. Canadian consumers aren't waiting for government directives. They're acting on their own, armed with apps and labels that steer them toward local goods. Social media amplifies their choices, with platforms buzzing about Buy Canadian campaigns and ethical alternatives. Youth groups in Quebec and Ontario are driving the charge, prioritizing domestic brands even at a premium. This isn't senseless nationalism, it's a deliberate reorientation of values where trust, not price, dictates purchasing decisions. For American companies, the path forward is, well, fraught with challenges. Earning back Canada's trust will require more than price cuts or marketing campaigns. It demands a reckoning with the policies and practices that sparked this rebellion. McDonald's can't just sell more fries, it must address why Canadians stopped buying them. Amazon can't rely on convenience when its warehouses are closing. Tesla can't ignore the backlash against its brand in a market it once dominated. These companies must navigate a new reality where consumer sentiment, not just trade agreements, shapes economic outcomes. The broader question looms, is this a one-time flare-up or the start of a global reset? If Canada, America's most familiar ally, can shift so decisively, other nations may take note. The wildfire of consumer resistance doesn't stop at the border, it spreads, challenging the dominance of American brands in markets worldwide. A soda, a sneaker, a subscription, these are no longer just products, they're battlegrounds for trust and influence. As Canadian shoppers redefine the rules, they're sending a message that resonates far beyond their borders. Loyalty is earned, not assumed. This quiet rebellion is a wake-up call. American brands, once invincible, are discovering their vulnerability. The systems that prop them up, supply chains, consumer habits, cultural cachet, are cracking under the weight of a single policy misstep. If trust can erode so quickly in Canada, it can erode anywhere. The stakes are enormous, billions in revenue, thousands of jobs, and the intangible but critical currency of global influence. As the checkout lines in Canada grow quieter for American goods, the world is watching. Will US companies adapt, or will they fade? Is this a momentary blip, or the dawn of a new era where honestly consumer choice, not corporate might, holds the reins? The story is far from over, and its next chapter depends on whether America can rebuild what it's lost, or if the silent rebellion will spread.